Okay, cool. So this is a video on how I do iRacing screenshots. Let me just turn that off. Yeah, so how I do iRacing screenshots and how I use Gimp to tweak those images. Gimp is a program a bit like Photoshop, but it's free. Um, I I'm only skimming the surface with what I do in there for my pictures, but and most of it I've got no idea what it does or how to use it, but I know enough about it where I can add some what I think look pretty cool effects to the racing pictures that we do. So I'll start from the top and just guide through how I do my pictures. First thing is in your iRacing folder. So go to Documents, iRacing, scroll down to your renderer DX11, and then down here I'll just highlight this option here, compress textures cars. That will be at 1 by default. It advises against changing it to 0, but if you do change it to 0, that helps to get rid of the jagged lines that you get on shadows and things like that in Sim. So I changed mine to 0. Up to you whether you want to do it or not, or take heed of that warning. But it does make your images look a little bit sharper in Sim. So I do that. So let's just come out of there. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to take a screenshot, and there's a bit of a process that I go through, or there's a few things that I consider when I'm uh, when I'm when I'm taking a screenshot. So I've already got a replay here. Yeah, that's fine. So what I'll do, I'm just going to let it run, and then I'm going to stop it when I want to take a picture. All right, okay, so I'll slot it there. First thing to do is hit Control and F12, and it brings up your camera menu here. So the X, Y, Z axes here you can use to zoom in, pan round, and move up and down. So I'm just going to use the Y to pan around here. In fact, I'm going to bring that back a bit, just put the car more in the middle of the track there. And if I bring this back around here, what I'm wanting to do here is get the grid and the National Motor Racing Museum and the super cheap auto sign as being in the background. Okay, so I use the Z to just lower down a little bit. Now I always think that the best angle is sort of in line with the top of the wheels, or where uh, the the um, the front uh, the front panel, the front wing, where that sort of meets the bottom of the A pillar. I think if you can imagine, if you've got a camera in your hand, if you're at that sort of height, I think that's the best angle. Now I've stopped the camera here for a couple of reasons. One is I'm thinking about where the sun is. I think this session was in afternoon conditions, um, and that will determine obviously where the sun is or where the light's coming from. So you can see behind the rear wheel, the shadow of the car is behind the car, so the light source is behind us. and that's what you want for the best the best picture. I do find if you're doing a practice session to get pictures as well, that afternoon sessions are the best as far as the lighting goes. Morning or late afternoon, with it being a little bit duller, a bit darker, not quite as ideal. So that's why I stopped it here. And the other reason as well is that because the car is turning left, the right side, the side that we're looking at here, is sort of, it's loaded up. So cars look better when they've got lower suspension, right? So with the car being loaded on this side, I just think it adds to the speed effect of the shot. Okay, so zoom down a little bit here. Now I can use where it says offset X here. I can use that to zoom in, but I find it better to use this zoom scroller here. There we go. And then where it says vanish X, vanish Y, you can use these to adjust the final sort of resting position of the camera. So I want to get this. One thing that I always look for is that when I've got the car in the middle, that I've got a similar distance between the edge of the screen on both sides and the car, so the car's somewhat in the middle. And in this particular picture, I want the car lower down just so I can get a bit more of the background in there. Hit spacebar to get rid of all that. I've not got the super cheap in there, but that's okay. Yeah, the sign's too high up anyway, so that's alright. Might just zoom in a touch more. Oh, fucking hell. Just gotta pull that background. One little thing to point out just in this camera menu as well. At the top right it says aim type. It says at group at the moment, so if there's a few cars on track, it will just be panning through the group. If you change that to at car, it makes the image sharper on the on your vehicle. Or if there's a group of you, using the bottom left there and at car, it will make that person's car look sharper. If I change that to the other option, which is static, I now have these orient options as well, so I can actually add tilting, and it gives me more adjustment in the actual movement of the camera. But I don't really use all that too much. The only time I would use that is that if I'm, let me think of an example. If I want to accentuate the look of a car turning into a corner, maybe it's somewhere where there's quite a big, let's say the carousel at the Nordschleife or something like that. You could use that effect there to add the effect even more. But that's the only reason I would use this in static mode. 99 times out of 100 I have it at car, and as you'll see, for some reason whenever you flick between, it likes to just throw everything out for you. But okay, so we've got the car in a position that I'm happy with. I'm happy with the camera angle and everything like that. So what I'm going to do here is I want to take a snapshot of that. So how I do this is press Shift, the Windows key, and S at the same time. And this will allow me to cut out a selected section of the shot. This is quite handy if you want to get rid of the iRacing watermark. Done. Alright, so what I need to do with that now is open Paint, paste, file, save as a PNG, Ferrari Bathurst. Done. Alright, so I can close that down now. Alright, so we can come out of iRacing. We've got our screenshot now. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to open Gimp. So Gimp is a free program. Go into Google, type in Gimp, and it will actually go into Google and type in Gimp paint program. That's probably a safer bet. Some wonderful things out there on the internet these days, isn't there? So, alright. But it's free to download. Once you've got it, this is what it looks like. So, in fact, where's my Ferrari image gone? Just move these two. There we go. Let's drag that into the middle bit here. Alright. Okay, so there's a lot of stuff on here as far as features and things like that. It's quite overwhelming, but rest assured, we don't need 99% of it. So, well, I don't use 99% of it. Whether some of it would be of value, I'm sure it would be, but I don't use it. Okay, so what I do once I've got my image in, the first thing that I do is I click on the colors tab here. And again, there's loads in here. There's only 2 or 3 of these options that I tend to use. I always start with exposure. So colors, exposure. This is quite good if you've taken a picture and it is late afternoon or morning and it's a bit dark. You can brighten it up a little bit using the exposure tool here. If I lighten the exposure and then with the black level, you can see what that's doing here. If I tweak that up a little touch, this can sometimes work quite well with our CMR team colours, with it being like a gunmetal grey. Can sometimes get a nice effect, especially with the carbon splitters and things like that. Don't want to go too dark. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So that's the first thing I do. Hit OK. Back into colours again. The next thing that I do here is saturation. So as you can see, this is to do with the colours. Depending on the colour of the car that you're picturing, and also where the scene is as well. If there's lots of grass, for example, you're not going to want too much saturation. What I want to do in this particular case, because this CMR livery has got fluoro yellow in it, I want to increase the saturation to sort of accentuate that, but I don't want to do it too much so the grass goes fluorescent. So it's just finding a fine line between. I still want the grass to look realistic so that the image doesn't look doctored in any way. So probably about there, I think, is about right. Okay. Okay, back into colours. So again, this is the only tab that we've used. So far we've done exposure and saturation. The next thing that I do is I click in the shadows and highlights bit. And for shadows, highlights and common, I only use the top scroller in each of these. I never tend to play with the shadows color adjustment, highlights color adjustment. It gets a little bit too complex for me with that, so I like to keep it simple and I just use the top ones. So firstly with shadows, and again it just depends on, in fact let me just move that over here a little bit. Depends on a lot of factors, the color of the car, the conditions for lighting, the type of tarmac that you're on. These don't make too much difference. In fact, with the shadows, as you can see, it's only really making a difference to the track around the car. Maybe a little bit in the wheels as well. So I'll probably leave that as is. Highlights. yeah, I'll probably darken those down a little bit. It just brings a nice effect to the front of the car around the headlight. So I'll darken that down. White point adjustment. Yeah, I think I'll bring that down as well. That's having a nice effect on the front of the car there. Okay. All right, so that's the first part of this bit done. So we've tweaked the image, we've sharpened up the car a little bit. Another thing that I just want to point out on here is if you go into filters, where it says enhance and then sharpen. So this is the only thing in the enhance option list that I ever use, and I barely ever use this. So all the deinterlace, high pass, noise reduction, I never use any of those when I'm doing my pictures. The one that I may use from time to time is this one here, and this is only if the image is a little bit low definition maybe, but because we tweaked that setting in the iRacing folder at the start, probably should never really need to use this. But if we click on that here, you can see it's sharpening up the image too much in this case because we've already got a sharp image to start with, but that's quite a good tool to have if you're trying to tweak a photo that is perhaps a little bit fuzzy around the edges to start with, and you just want to bring some definition into it. That can be a quite a useful way of doing that, but we'll cancel out of there because we don't need that. Okay, right, so the next thing to do here is we want to look at this bar here. So this is our layers tab. Now layers, if that term doesn't mean anything to you, it's something that you see a lot in Photoshop, in Gimp obviously, and this is how iRacing paints are made, how images that have been tweaked are made as well. They're a collection of layers. Think of each layer as being a sticker. You know, you start off with like a base image, and then you're just adding things onto it, adding all these different layers, all these different stickers onto it, and then at the end you're left with the final product. You can take layers out in between. That's essentially how layers work. So what we want to do is we're going to create a duplicate of this. So we've got two layers of the same, and we're going to have one of them blurry, one of them clear, and then we're going to put the two together, but we're going to cut the car out. So essentially what we want to do is we want to blur the background and leave the car as is. That's the effect that works best 99% of the time. Blur background with a sharp looking car in the foreground. How we do that is we need two of these pictures. We make one blurry, we have one clear one, we cut out the clear car and we stick it on the blurry background, if that makes sense. But anyway, let's get into it. So we're on the layers tab here, so hover over the image, right click and hit duplicate layer. Again, there's loads of options within here. We only need this one. So duplicate layer, and now we've got two images of the same. So we want to select the top one, so the new one. And this is where we add the effects. Now in Gimp there are loads of effects that you can add. There's only two that I use. So filters, blur. These are all the different types of blur that you can have. The only two that I ever use are linear motion blur and zoom motion blur. How I determine which one to use, it depends on the angle of the photo. So a linear motion blur is the one that you would use if the car is side on. So that's from left to right blur, or from right to left. A zoom motion blur is if something's coming towards you or going away from you. So if you've got a head-on image of a car coming towards you, then you would use the zoom motion blur effect in that particular instance, or the linear motion blur if it's side on. In this particular picture, there's a case for both because we're kind of, we're head on and side on. But I'm actually going to use the linear motion blur because I think it works best. It will the car's turning left, and I want to accentuate the speed that it's carrying into the corner. So I'm going to go with linear motion blur. So filters, blur, linear motion blur, and this is what happens. So it's brought up the little pop-up here. So for the blur effect, firstly the angle. This is what direction you want the blurs to be in. So at the moment they're going from left to right. I actually want them going the other way because you want them opposite to the direction that the car is going in. So there we go. So that's the correct angle. The length. This is how severe you want the blur to be, basically. So you'll see as this goes up, it goes to the extreme there. As a general rule, I never really go above 30. And in my mind, I use 25 and upwards if the car's going flat out on a straight somewhere. Under 20 anywhere else on the circuit. So it's relative to the speed that the car's going in as to what you would want this at. Obviously, you don't want to go too close down to zero because then you won't be able to see the effect at all. But I would never really go under 10. For this, I probably reckon at about I reckon around 15 is about right for this particular angle, based on the speed that the car's going in this picture. So we'll go with 15 or 15.64. Doesn't really matter. Hit OK. All right. So now we've got the blur applied. What we do now is we want to uncheck the blurred layer, and we do that just by clicking on that eyeball there. So now we're back to the original image, and now what we want to do is we want to cut out our subject, which is the car. So to do that, we come over here. We want that lasso looking tool, the free select tool. Press that, and now what we do is we just draw around the car. So I'll zoom in a bit. I'm not going to do this. Let's move that bar out of the way. I'm not going to do this perfectly because to get it spot on takes a little bit of time, but we'll do it. I don't want to speed up this bit of video or miss this bit out. I can't speed it up because it's live, but there's a couple of things that a couple of sort of banana skins that come your way when you're doing this for the first time, and I just want to get to those and explain how the workaround, because it's one thing just clicking around and drawing around a car, and finishing up that way, and that's fine. But the first issue you're going to come across is with the windows of the car. I'll explain what I mean. Because if we come up here, I'll explain it when I get to it. I'll just click around here. I'm doing this on a pad rather than an actual mouse, which is feels a bit weird, but anyway. If you go wrong, by the way, just delete back out of it. And you can also, as well, you can move the lines once you've placed them down. So if you click them a bit out of place, don't worry, you can always readjust them. or delete them altogether. Okay, let's just get this bit done. Like I say, it's far from perfect, but you get the idea. Now, as we come up with the A pillar here, if I was just to continue up there and go around the rest of the car, that will be fine. But the issue that we're going to have when the image is finished is that the background is going to be blurred, and the car is going to look all crisp and sharp. But then this window here, the track in the background is going to be crisp and sharp as well. It's not going to be blurred like the rest of it. So we need to incorporate the outside elements that are inside the car that you can see when we do this. And how I do that is I'll just click inside so that bit is clear. Like I say, I'm not going to make this perfect, but just to show you what I'm doing. Like I say, we can move these, so let's get that there. Alright, so what I've done there is I have kept the roll bars and the pillars inside the car as part of our subject, but I've cut out the outside sections, i.e. the windows. So when we apply the final blur to this, it will add it out in the window areas and outside, but it will leave the roll bars and everything as is. I hope that makes sense. But what we need to do is we need to make this entire subject as one. There's probably a way that you can outline the car, done, and then go back and do the windows as a second subject, but I actually don't know how to do that, so this is why I do it this way. Like I say, if there is a way of doing it, that's fine, but it only takes a couple of minutes anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And then I'm going to have the same issue with the rear wing here. So I'll just drop down, I'll just cut out this section here. Again, when you're doing it properly, you want to make sure that these are pretty tight to the lines are pretty neat and tidy. I'll just bring those closer together. So like with the windows, just cut out that section there, so that will be treated as in the same way as the background when it comes to adding the blur. So around the wing, the other issue that you're going to come across will be when you have other cars in the image as well, because once I join these dots, it then finalizes the overall image. We're telling Gimp that we've got our subject now by joining those dots. So what I do when there's another car, another few cars, is I will go all the way around, probably about 90% of the way around the car, and then I'll go to the next car, do the same thing, and do it like that. And then I'd bring those lines very close together like I did with the window and the rear wing, but that will add all of the surrounding vehicles. It will include them into this when you're telling it this is your subject. Alright. Okay, so that's now joined up. I'm just going to use this here to zoom back out. Alright, so car's there, and as I hover over it you can see that that is now highlighted. So what we do now is we re-add the effect. So now everything is blurred and the car outline is still there. Hover over the top image, right click, and go down to where it says add layer mask. Just make sure that the settings are the same as that. Add, and then now we grab a paintbrush. Just make sure that it's a good size, and make sure that black is the color that you have selected, and paint over the car. Once you've done that, go to select and none, and that gets rid of the outline, and that's it. And that is how I would do an image. So it's pretty easy to do. You know, once you've done one or two, it's really easy. Like I say, if you've not used Gimp before, there is a lot to it, but just remember that we only need a tiny percentage of the features in there. We used, what, 2 or 3 of the options in the colors tab, and everything else was in filters under, you know, we use filter once to choose the blur, and that's it. And then so finishing up, we just want to go to File, Export as Ferrari Bathurst PNG. Already exists. Do you want to replace it? Yep. Done. And that's it. So thank you for watching. If there is anything you're not sure about, any questions that you've got, feel free to drop me a message or drop it into the comments section, and I will answer it as best as I can. Other than that, thank you for watching, and see you next time.